Hey, it's your Katy, Texas Realtor, and in this video, I'm going to share with you the 7 essential steps that you cannot skip to buy a home in 2023. So if you remember, not too long ago, we had an incredible boom in the real estate market during COVID. Some of you may have even felt the effects of it. You may have sold a home at a higher price than expected. You may have even bought a home at a higher price than expected, but a much lower interest rate than what you may have seen prior to that era. Or you tried to participate in the market maybe as a buyer, but you decided it was not for you, it was too crazy, and you decided to back out. So no matter where you were then, I hope that you're here now because you're gearing up to make a purchase in 2023. If that's the case, do me a favor, drop a comment, let me know where you're watching from or where you're looking to buy in. While you're doing that, please consider subscribing. This helps YouTube show you more content like this and get you better prepared for the purchase. The process of buying a home could be as short as 30 days or as lengthy as 3 months. In this video, I'm going to address the factors that can either shorten or lengthen that buying process. But regardless, there are 7 non-negotiable steps that you must take if buying a home in 2023 is your goal. Although everyone's goals and circumstances are different, you will quickly recognize these steps as you go through that process, as they are pretty much universal. Number 1 is making a decision and not looking back. Number 2 is to get pre-approved. Number 3 is to study the markets that you're interested in buying a home in. Number 4 is to shop for home. Number 5 is to get under contract. Number 6, the things that you need to do while under contract. And number 7, closing and next steps. So let's start with number 1, which is the decision stage, which is the most difficult. Why is it the most difficult? Because after making the decision to make that purchase, everything else has a cadence and has a rhythm that you just have to tap into and follow. There is no new science to discover. The only science to discover is whether you are committed to the process. And there's a couple of things that you need to ask yourself to make sure that you are committed to this process, because in my experience, if you start the process and you encounter an obstacle, which sometimes you do encounter an obstacle buying a home, 50% of people will quit and have wasted their time, efforts, money in multiple inspections. If they have a home that they need to sell, they're letting down potential buyers. There's a whole host of reasons why you need to make sure that this is the right time for you. First of all, in your personal life. Secondly, you need to make sure that you have a strong enough reason to push you through to the finish line. And that's not just because, well, I've been renting for a while, I'm ready to buy. That's not a strong enough why. A strong enough why, like anything, should be something like, in my example, I want to provide my family the comfort and space that I believe they deserve, and tap into the fruits of my labor to gift us as a family that. That's my why. That can be your why. Your why can be different. Maybe your why is you want to start building an investment portfolio. Maybe you want to be the first in your family. Maybe you want to buy something brand new and live in it forever. Maybe you want to buy your starter home and then build equity and buy the forever home afterwards. Whatever your why is, discover it. Number 3, you need to ask yourself, is it the right time? And if so, do you foresee yourself being in whatever home for the next 3 to 5 years? Trying to make a move within the first couple of years is usually very difficult. Why? Because you don't build enough equity to leave the home. And if the market shifts and it's not in a favorable direction, then you could actually be upside down once you sell. you could always lease a home. As a good rule of thumb, make sure you're ready to stay in that home for 3 to 5 years. And number 4, is this the right market for you to buy a home in? Now, there's a lot of misconceptions as to when is a better time and when is a worse time. At the end of the day, everything I've just listed is personal to you. The only things that are outside of your control are the average prices and the interest rates in these areas that you're interested in. So you're going to, in a buyer's market, have typically more flexible pricing. Sellers are willing to wheel and deal a little bit more, but as you've seen recently, we have slightly higher than previous interest rates. 5%, 5.5% is not a terrible rate. That's just my opinion. Historically, it's not a bad thing, but we have seen 7.5 in some instances of recent memory. During a seller's market, however, you're going to see less houses come to the market, which means with the same amount or more buyers as what we have now, everyone's fighting for the few scraps, which then drives the prices up. So the question is, if in this seller's market like we had recently, you have a lower interest rate and the cost of borrowing money is lower, but you have to pay a higher price for the house, but the cost of borrowing money is higher, but you can negotiate a lower price, which one would you choose? It's entirely up to you. So that's the thing that we cannot time, is when is the right time for you. We can't time the market either. We don't know what's going to happen in 2 months from now. Step number 2 is to get pre-approved. The first thing that you need to do is, once you've decided that this is the thing that you want to do, find a local real estate agent, find somebody that's highly ranked or somebody that's recommended by somebody that you know, like, and trust, or someone that you've been following their content and you feel like this person has a grasp on what's going on in your local market. Have this real estate agent refer you to either a lender or a mortgage broker that can help you get a pre-approval. And I'm going to get to what a pre-approval is in just a bit. But what I want you to understand is, even though that person suggests somebody to work with, you don't have to work with that person. That doesn't change anything. I also recommend getting 3 different quotes for a pre-approval. So what is a pre-approval? A pre-approval is essentially a letter that a lender, mortgage broker, or your bank will give you saying, we are willing to let you borrow up to this much for a home purchase. All the funds in this loan will go to the purchase of the home, nothing else. There are different products that you can use to fix up the home and all these other things, but we're going to focus only on making a purchase. That's it. Make sure that you get a pre-approval and not a pre-qualification. A pre-qualification, the difference is you have not submitted documentation to support the amount of income that you've stated to this person that you make. You have not had a credit check. You need to go through the full process so that the lender, bank, or mortgage broker fully understands where you stand. If this is something that you don't want to do, you don't want your credit ran, you don't want to share documentation on your financials, then this is not the right time for you to buy a home. Whenever you feel comfortable doing that, that's when it will be the right time for you to buy a home. Before we move on to the next step, make sure that while you're in the process of getting a pre-approval and largely in the process of buying a home, that you do not make any large purchases using your credit, which will affect your credit in your utilization, and that you don't make any changes to your income. Don't quit your job. Some would say don't get a job, but I would say don't quit your job. Even if you hate it, just stick it out until the transaction is done. Number 3, doing the research about the location where you want to live. Oftentimes, clients will come to me and tell me, this is our budget, we've been pre-approved, we're ready, we're committed, let's do it. And I'll ask, okay, where do you want to live? And let's say, for example, we have a double income, no kids, the school rankings are not an issue, so sky's the limit. We just need to be within 30 minutes of work. That's it. That can be very different depending on what market you're interested in. So what I would recommend is narrowing down the number of bedrooms, the number of baths, and a minimum square footage, as well as a minimum lot size, the size of the terrain that the home is sitting on. If you're looking for a condo or something like that, then ignore that. Just make sure you focus on the amenities in the community if it's a condo purchase. The other thing that you need to focus on top of these items, is what are some must-haves in not just the home, but the area. Do you need to have access to a major freeway? We've talked about being close to work. Is there anything else that you need to be close to or far away from to make this purchase something that you will really stick through for the next 3 to 5 years? When it comes to doing your research, one thing to avoid is the nice to haves versus the must haves. The must haves are non-negotiable, and you already know them in your mind. You've been thinking about them while you were considering buying a home. Nice to haves, however, you can live without, or they're the items that you are okay waiting those 3 and 5 years until you get to the forever home if this is your starter home. If there is no such thing in your mind as a nice to have versus a must have, perfect. You have to have an ample budget to make sure that you can, if not find everything, be able to add everything. And what I mean is 90% of the homes that you see will only have 90% of everything that you want and need. The other 10% will have probably 95, 96% of everything that you want and need. No home will be perfect. Everything will have its defects. So if the defects are something you can live with for 3 to 5 years, so you can move on to the next home and then try to be perfectionist about it, or if you have a large enough budget where you can remedy those defects, then consider that and communicate that with your real estate agent. The last thing I'll say about buying in a certain market in a certain area and researching that area is you really need to consider what your budget gives you in that area. Every single market, let's take Houston for example, has tons of submarkets, and within itself, let's take Katy as a submarket, has its own local markets. Katy, Texas has 4 major zip codes. Each one of them has different types of homes, different ages of homes, different schools, and different price ranges. So you cannot generally say, I want to live in Houston, I want to live in Katy. You need to research what your budget allows in each area and narrow it down even further to make your experience in home shopping a much more pleasant one. Number 4, let's talk about shopping for homes. So here are some things that you need to do before you even get in the car and go out and see homes in person. Number 1, you need to coordinate, compare, and contrast. So the biggest thing that I advise clients to do is let's get on a text message thread. Let's shoot some listings back and forth. Let's compare and contrast. And then let's narrow it down. You don't have to whittle it down too much because a lot of times the pictures for homes are not exactly what you're going to see when you see them in person. You still want to see them. But if it's not the right lot size, if it's not the right amount of bedrooms, baths, if the style and floor plan are something that are completely throwing you off, junk it, make a short list, and go 2 to 3 to 4 times a week and narrow it down depending on what your time frame is. I find that most people are taking Friday through Sunday to see homes, and that's perfectly fine. Another way that you can see homes is attending open houses in the target neighborhood or target market that you're interested in, or going to new construction starts and sales offices to see what's available and get more information. Bring all that information back to your real estate agent and see if they can work on some deals to get you the absolutely best deal for you to move in with the least amount of money. Once you have that top list from the ones that you've been text messaging on your thread, what you want to do is go see them. Take the time to just narrow them down in person. Most people within the first 15 seconds know whether that's the right home or not. There's not really like, once you cross the door threshold, most people already know, I would not want to live here, I do want to live here, or I may want to live here. So once you've seen all of them, take a second visit to the maybes and the yeses and go through them thoroughly. Here's a list of things that you're going to want to look for in your short list of homes that you really liked when you go a second time. Check the foundation. Bring a marble, bring a quarter, or just look at the floor. See if there's any foundation issues. Check for cracks on the wall. Sometimes there's settlement cracks, which are not as serious as a foundation repair issue, but check for foundation repair issues. Number 2, make sure that the layout works for you and your future plans. At first glance, you could have fallen in love with the lot size, the 2-story ceilings in the living room, but you neglected to see that there's a giant column between you and the front door to the master bedroom or something, right? We always miss things whenever we are in ooh and ah of other things that we really like. Number 3, most air conditioning units have a model or serial number. You can check that to check the age, and then have your agent reach out to the seller or the seller's agent to see, hey, how often is this maintained? Because you're gonna want to take that into account for the next step, which is making an offer. Roof and the windows, the same thing as the AC. You're going to want to check the condition of these items because these are some of your big ticket items that eventually are gonna, if not repaired, lead to higher energy bills, lower energy efficiency, and it's going to cost a good amount of money to have all of these replaced at the same time. We'll get more into negotiating some of these things later in the video. However, these are things to make a good note of. To a much lesser degree, whenever you go to check out the home for a second time, the cosmetic things like the paint, countertops, things of that nature, depending on where the home stands, somewhere in the range of your budget, you could consider not completely ignoring those, but don't make those the sticking points, because these are nice to haves. These are not must haves. So if there is a Formica countertop that's obviously rotting, or obviously there's something wrong with it, it's bubbling or something, and the paint is beige and you hate all of it, that's one thing. But if there's nothing wrong with it and it's livable and it works with the budget, and you see yourself allocating funds for later painting the entire house, great. If not, we can negotiate some of these costs, and we'll talk about that next. Number 5 is getting under contract. The first thing you need to do is to submit an offer. Now, every state has a different way of doing this step and how to submit an offer. Here in Texas, for the most part, you'll fill out our Texas Real Estate Commission promulgated forms, which, if countersigned, then become the actual contract. So make sure that whatever you're putting in these forms, you're actually ready to follow through with. And we'll talk more about these specific forms in a later video. So in order to submit an offer, you need to make sure that you understand these forms. Sit down with your real estate agent, dedicate at least an hour of your time to make sure what you're getting yourself into by filling out and signing these forms. Number 2, understand what kind of deposits and other financial investments you're going to have to be making into just processing the transaction. Some of the most common deposits that you'll have to do for us here in Texas are your earnest money deposit, an option fee, which we'll discuss more later. You might have to deal with surveys. You might have to deal with the appraisal cost, and I always recommend getting an inspection. So when it comes to submitting an offer, before you get to that step, make sure that you investigate a little bit further about the area. Make sure that you know whether it's a flood zone or not. Make sure you know if it has flooded or not. Sometimes that information is not available as the house passes down through different hands. You might not have that information. Are there any leases on the home? Now, not just is somebody renting it, but are the solar panels being leased? Are any other attachments to the home being leased and are not owned by the seller? And any recent repairs, and do they have the warranties or receipts for these? Are the warranties transferable? These are all really good questions to go over with your real estate agent to make sure that they're shooting it to the other side. Okay, so you've made it to part 6. This is my favorite part. We are under contract. The other side has accepted our offer. They countersign. We're under contract. What does that mean? It means it's time to get it done. Like I mentioned before, this part could take 30 days, 45 days, 60 days. Everybody's different. Okay, so you're under contract. Now what? First thing, you have 3 days to deposit earnest money, option fee, and schedule the inspection as soon as possible. Inspectors can get busy. There's many of them, but they can all be busy at the same time. It happens. So you have those 3 days to make these deposits, get the call out to the inspector, start your option period. So an option period is a period of 3 to 7 days. You get to decide that when you submit your offer, for which you're going to pay a non-refundable fee of $100 to $500. Again, up to you. It's part of your offer. During this time, you can back out of the contract for any good reason. During this time, you get the inspection done. During this time, if you do decide to back out, you lose that non-refundable $100 to $500 and you get your earnest money deposit back. I never encourage anyone to have that as a strategy just to get the home inspected. Unfortunately, if you miss a deadline, you're stuck. So don't play that game. As soon as your offer is accepted, I need you to send a copy over to your lender so that they can start the process. They are one of the ones that can delay this transaction the most. Also, make sure that your lender orders the appraisal as quickly as possible. And if you have to purchase a survey, make sure you wait till the option period ends to order the survey. It could take 10 days for somebody to come out and do it, 14 days. But that doesn't matter. Why does it not matter? Because if you need to cancel during the option period, why are you going to pay for a survey? It wouldn't make any sense. So just wait until the option period is done. You're ready to proceed. Order that survey. You will have time to get it done. Don't worry about it. So speaking of delays, so what are some of the things that can delay a transaction? Number one, the biggest one is the buyer communication with their lender. If the buyer is not communicating with their lender at least every other day about any documents that may be needed, signatures, what have you, we could have a serious delay. I'm dealing with a delay right now for that very same reason, even though I've coached my client, hey, lender sent you this, make sure you get this signed, have you done this, this, and that. Now we have to delay the closing another 10 days. It happens. Number two, communication between title and the lender. The title company, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in just a second, they need to communicate with the lender to make sure that their documents all match. If their documents don't match, then there's a delay. And number three, the communication between the title and the buyer and myself. It happens, not often, it happens that we miss an email, we don't communicate the right things, and we have the wrong information. That could lead to more delays. Delays are the last thing we want because this is time sensitive, first of all, and secondly, we're playing with a lot of money coming out and going into a lot of people's pockets. So that's the last thing we want. The most important thing that could delay your transaction, however, is an appraisal. So an appraisal is similar to an inspection. Your lender's going to order it. It's not somebody that works for the lender, but it is a sort of inspection that tells you the value of the home. If the value of that inspection, that number that the appraiser comes back with, comes back under what you're under contract in, that may be an issue. Depending on the kind of loan that you have been approved for, it may be an issue. Contact your real estate agent immediately after you have that information to see what can be done. But a good real estate agent will already have safeguards in place before you even go under contract for that contingency. So I mentioned the title company. So the title company is a middle person that handles the entire transaction. They don't work for you, they don't work for me, they work for the transaction. They see to it that they get it done, and they issue a sort of insurance policy on the transaction in case after you've closed, somebody says, hey, that's my house, why do you have it? That means the title company messed up, and they have to insure any damages that happen because of things like that. It doesn't happen often. It could happen. That's why the title company's job is not just making sure that all the documents are together. They do what's called a title search, which is checking the history of the home and making sure that the seller that's selling is the right seller and that the buyer is who they say they are. Okay, lastly, part 7 would be closing. You show up with your ID and your funds. You either wire them or you'll bring a big cashier's check for all your closing costs and any other fees, and you will go ahead and sign a stack of documents that will give you ownership of the property. There might still be a few hours delay because the seller has to sign too. They still have to drop off keys, so it's not as immediately as you sign you take possession. There's still communication that happens with the title company to make sure that everything's 100% above board. A few days before that, however, or at least that at worst case scenario, the morning of, a few hours before that, you'll do what's called a final walkthrough. You walk through the property and make sure that it's exactly as you remembered it last time you saw it. You make sure that no crazy improvements or damages have been made to the property. Otherwise, this is another thing that could delay the process, and we wouldn't be closing because they're selling you something that isn't right. At this point, you should have a home warranty. Most new construction homes come with it. If it's an older home, I usually gift my clients a home warranty. So this is not home insurance, and we'll discuss home insurance and the difference between home warranty and home insurance in a later video. But home warranty protects a lot of your electrical, plumbing, and sometimes even appliances depending on the type of coverage that you get. There's a few good companies out there. I won't mention any of them because I'm not looking for that kind of either sponsorship or Jorge said this. No. Do your due diligence. The type of policy that you get with each one of these is going to vary. The cost is typically anywhere between $400 and $700 a year. And they do offer service calls for a small trip fee. And the absolute last thing is set yourself on autopilot for annual maintenance on the home. And in the next video, I'm going to go a little bit further on what you should be doing every single month to maintain your home. Congratulations, if you made it this far, this is exactly how you're going to buy a home in 2023. I hope it's been helpful. I hope this is something that you do carry out. If there's anything I can do for you in the Houston area, my information's down below. I love to help people, and this is my true calling. If there's any other questions, please leave it in the comments. Consider subscribing so that you can follow along in our journey to get you educated for that purchase in 2023.